Hello, everyone, and welcome back. If you've been following along with our recent lessons, you know we just wrapped up conquering the 4 types of responsibility centers. So naturally, it's time to tackle the messy, complex internal dynamics that happen right between those centers. I'm talking about transfer pricing. As an instructor who literally lives and breathes the CMA syllabus, I can tell you right now, this is absolutely one of the most highly tested, deeply scrutinized areas on the entire CMA Part 1 exam. My goal today is to give you the absolute best breakdown of this material so you can strut into that testing center with total confidence. Let's dive right into this explainer and get you completely ready for test day. To really understand why this topic is tested so heavily, you have to look at the massive internal tug-of-war that happens inside big organizations. Basically, transfer pricing is the delicate art of setting a price when one division of a company sells a product or service to another division of that very same company. Think about it like an internal engine division selling its freshly built motors to the internal car assembly division. So, how much should they charge? Well, this presents a massive dilemma. If corporate sets that transfer price way too high, the buying division's expenses just absolutely skyrocket, and their managers look terrible on paper. But on the flip side, if they set it too low, the selling division's revenues plummet, and their managers look bad. It's a constant, highly stressful balancing act for corporate leadership. So, how do we actually solve this? Well, here is our game plan for today's explainer. 1. Goal congruence. 2. The 3 primary methods. 3. The general rule. 4. Dual pricing. And 5. Exam strategy. Let's start right off with Section 1, Goal congruence. Before we even touch the math, we have to understand the psychology behind the exam questions. And the biggest trap you're going to see is managers acting selfishly just to protect their own bonuses. Listen, the CMA exam desperately wants you to focus on this exact concept. Goal congruence happens when the managers of both the buying and selling divisions make decisions that aren't just good for their own individual bonus checks, but are the absolute best for the company as a whole. So, the absolute crucial takeaway here is that every single time you look at a transfer pricing scenario on the exam, you've got to ask yourself, does this pricing structure force the manager's goals to perfectly align with corporate's goals? Because if it doesn't, I guarantee you it's not the right answer. All right, let's move right along to Section 2, the 3 primary methods. Let's see how this actually builds into a practical strategy. There are 3 main methods companies use to establish these internal prices, and you need to know exactly when to apply each one. They are market-based pricing, cost-based pricing, and negotiated pricing. Now, don't worry if this sounds like a lot to memorize. I promise I'm going to break each of these down so simply that it just clicks for you. First up, we have market-based pricing. This simply means you use the exact same price that the division is already charging its outside customers. You use this specific method when there's a perfectly competitive market and the selling division is operating at full capacity. The beautiful part about this, it is completely objective. It literally prevents managers from fudging the numbers to make their own division look better. The market dictates the price, and that is the end of the story. The second method is cost-based pricing. This is where you set the price using variable cost, full absorption cost, or maybe a cost plus a markup. But heads up, there is a massive risk here that you absolutely need to be aware of for the exam. If the selling division is operating super inefficiently and driving their own costs up, using actual costs means they will simply transfer their own inefficiency directly over to the buying division. That is incredibly unfair to the buyer. Because of this, standard cost is always preferred over actual cost because it forces the seller to eat the cost of their own mistakes. Our third method is negotiated pricing, and it's exactly what it sounds like. The 2 division managers sit down across the table and hammer out a deal. We use this when no clear outside market price exists. It's great because it nicely mimics a real-world open market business transaction. However, the downside, it heavily relies on manager bargaining power. The real danger here is that it often devolves into a situation where basically whoever screams the loudest wins. The manager who happens to be the better negotiator gets the better deal, regardless of what might actually be best for the company's overall goal congruence. Okay, shifting gears to Section 3, the general rule. I want everyone to take a deep breath here. We are moving into the math portion, and I know that can cause some major test anxiety. But listen, I have taught this to so many students, and once you see the logic behind it, it becomes totally second nature. This right here is the secret sauce for your exam. To achieve that all-important goal congruence we talked about, the minimum transfer price should always follow this exact formula. Transfer price equals the variable cost per unit plus the opportunity cost per unit to the seller. Let's break this down.
The variable cost is super straightforward, right? It's just what it costs to make one more unit. The tricky part is figuring out that opportunity cost. Let's look at a scenario with excess capacity. If the selling division has idle machines just sitting there or empty factory space, what are they actually giving up to make an internal sale? The answer is literally zero. Their opportunity cost is zero because they aren't giving up any outside sales to fulfill this internal order. Therefore, in this specific scenario, the minimum transfer price is simply the variable cost. Now let's contrast that with full capacity. If the seller is completely maxed out, already selling every single unit they can possibly make to outside customers, taking an internal order means they literally have to turn an outside customer away. That means their opportunity cost is the contribution margin they lose by diverting that sale internally. So the minimum price becomes the variable cost plus that lost contribution margin. And here is a huge pro tip from me to you. At full capacity, when you do this math, the transfer price almost always equals the market price.
Moving right along to Section 4, dual pricing. This is a somewhat rare concept in the real world, but let me tell you, it is highly tested on the CMA exam because it honestly seems like paper magic. It's basically the accounting equivalent of having your cake and eating it too.
Look at how brilliantly this setup motivates everyone. Under a dual pricing system, the selling division gets credited with the full market price for the internal transfer. This keeps them highly motivated and makes their performance metrics look amazing. Meanwhile, the buying division is only charged the cost of the item. This keeps their expenses incredibly low and their managers perfectly happy. But as we all know, there is absolutely no such thing as a free lunch in accounting. The catch is that you have essentially just created profit out of thin air on paper. The seller's revenue does not match the buyer's expense. So to fix this illusion, the company has to make a massive adjustment at the corporate level just to reconcile the books. It requires tons of extra administrative work, which is exactly why it's rare in practice. But you absolutely must know the mechanics of it for the test. All right, let's shift into high gear for our final section. Section 5, exam strategy. I want to give you a foolproof checklist so that when you sit down for your certification exam, you know exactly how to attack literally any transfer pricing question they throw your way.
When you see a transfer pricing scenario pop up, I want you to immediately ask yourself these 3 crucial questions. Number 1, is there idle capacity? If the answer is yes, boom, you instantly know that variable cost is your floor. Number 2, is there a market price? If there is, that's usually your ceiling. And number 3, what is best for the whole company? Always refer back to goal congruence. To apply those questions, you need to establish the absolute mathematical limits for both sides. Remember this rule for test day. The buying division will only willingly buy internally if the transfer price is less than or equal to what they can get from an outside supplier. That is your buyer limit. Conversely, the selling division will only willingly sell internally if the price is greater than or equal to their incremental costs. That is your seller limit. If you can just map out those 2 limits on your scratch paper, your only job is to find the sweet spot right between the buyer's ceiling and the seller's floor. If you find that sweet spot, you have completely mastered the topic, and you are going to absolutely nail those exam questions. We've covered a ton of ground today, and you now have the exact tools you need to handle this internal tug-of-war for the CMA Part 1 exam. But before we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a fascinating thought. You now know how to find the mathematical sweet spot within a single country's borders. But what happens to that sweet spot when the selling division is in a country with a, say, 10% corporate tax rate and the buying division is in a country with a 30% tax rate? How do multinational corporations manipulate these internal prices to legally shift their profits across borders and navigate international tax laws? It's a wildly complex, high-stakes game of global chess, and it is definitely something to ponder as you continue your studies. Keep up the amazing work, happy studying, and I will see you on the next explainer.